Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Dee and today I'm just going to make my rustic einkorn pie crust with you guys. This is a recipe that I adapted from another recipe that I used to use, and it's been working out really well for me, so I just wanted to show you my tips. I think tourtiere is one of my favorite meals. It's a traditional French-Canadian meat pie. My family always had it on Christmas Eve, and I know a lot of other Quebecois families also did the same thing. Myself, I'm from Nova Scotia, but my mom did this, and we have some French-Canadian Acadie heritage. So if you're also French-Canadian, let me know in the comments. So here I just sifted all of my einkorn flour. I don't usually sift it, but it is really helpful, I find, for the pie crust recipe. It's going to be pretty rustic either way. Then I give a handful of salt. I use salted butter as well, but you can totally use unsalted butter or lard. I really just use whichever I have on hand. It honestly does not matter, but my hack is stick it in the freezer. So that's why it's a bit difficult to cut. But I really find that it's easier to work with if the butter starts out frozen. Then I just slice it up with the knife, and butter thaws really quickly, so it's already starting to thaw. Be careful when you do this though, because it can be a little bit unpredictable how it's going to cut. I have the whole recipe with like detailed amounts on my blog, so I'll be sure to post the link for you. It's a recipe that we make a lot and it was passed down, and I just find it to be really delicious. I have the pie crust recipe and then also how to make the meat filling for tourtiere as well. So yeah, I definitely find that the pie crust tastes best with at least some butter. So highly recommend, if you can do dairy, to use butter in this recipe. Some people were asking me about my wedding ring. It's actually a really funny story. My husband, I don't even know where to start. Okay. I have 5 children, 5 living children, and you would think that by my 5th baby, I would know when to take my rings off in pregnancy. I've always taken them off, but with my 5th baby, I didn't know when, so I'll just stop. You can see here that I am adding some ice water now. I use the mixer for this. You can totally do it by hand too, but it's way quicker and easier with the whisk attachment in the mixer. So all the butter's all crumbly in there with the flour, and then you just slowly add. It's really only about like 7 tablespoons of water that you need, and just make sure it's nice and cold ice water. I always go by consistency too. When I made this recipe this time, it might have been a little on the dry side, but whatever. It's just a weeknight dinner, like I wasn't going to be too worried about it. I think pastry is something that you can stress about, or you can just be like, tastes good either way. So you can see that I'm mixing it up until it's kind of coming together. Back to my story about my wedding ring. So my fingers were just so swollen, and I'm not really a jewelry person. Like I really don't like feeling like the sensation of having a watch on my wrist or wearing a lot of rings or anything. So the feeling of having my fingers swelling up around my wedding ring was really stressing me out. It felt very uncomfortable, and I just like felt a bit panicky about it too. And I just thought it would be so embarrassing to go to a jeweler and get them to cut it off. And I really didn't want to do that. And so I implored my husband, after I tried every trick, like I tried the dental floss trick, I tried everything. And I was just like, honey, can you just cut it off for me? And my wedding ring had diamonds all around it, except for there's this one part at the very back that didn't have diamonds. And so he got out his like metal cutting shears. I don't even know what to call them, tin snips. And he tried to cut it, and it was really difficult to do. And originally we were kind of cutting on the diamond. I was like, no, it won't work there. Here, try here. And he got it off, and he had to even like tear it apart a bit with pliers. Like, it was a very intense situation. I was so relieved. And I was like, I've never been more in love with you. So I still have it. It's in my drawer, actually. And maybe I'll get it. I could get the diamonds reset or something. But I don't know. I've just been wearing this little silicone one, like that's for like wearing to the gym and stuff. And that's the story of my ring. So anyway, you can see here that I'm just rolling out my pastry, and I kind of like absentmindedly didn't form it into a really nice ball first, so it's rolling out really unevenly, but I just decided to keep going with it because, I don't know, I was trying to get dinner on the table, and I was like, all right, well, we're doing it. I always make enough, and my pie crust recipe on the blog is the right size for my cast iron pans, because with 5 boys, we go through a lot of meat pie when we have tourtiere. So I like to make like a nice big deep dish tourtiere in my cast iron pan. So that's what I'm doing here. I am in no way like an elaborate type of cook, and I'm literally just patching up a pie crust hole. But it's fine. It's gonna turn out just fine. You can see the color of einkorn flour is a bit different from other flours, but actually it's really amazing if you get organic flour from a farm that's totally unbleached, how much darker it is in color and how much more flavor it has than white flour from the store. I mean, there's some things that you do want a really white flour for, but I really enjoy the farm that we get our einkorn from. I think they do an amazing job, and things tend to turn out really nicely with this flour. I prefer to use a bit of a all-purpose einkorn versus a whole wheat einkorn. I just find that the results are a bit better. Now, I'm a person who is gluten intolerant. I've been gluten-free for like 15 years at least. No, probably more now, 16 years. So I'm not used to working with gluten flour. So for me, working with any wheat, even if it's einkorn wheat, it is so much nicer than working with gluten-free flour, and you get such better results. I think it's more challenging to switch to einkorn if you're used to working with gluten flours, because you don't get the results that you're used to. But us people who are used to baking gluten-free, it's like, ooh, this is so nice and fun. I mean, compared to trying to make gluten-free pie crust, this is really easy. If you are having trouble rolling out your pastry, though, this is a tip that I use with gluten-free flour, is actually just put out parchment paper and put your ball of pie dough in the middle, and then put another one on top and roll it out in between your two pieces of parchment paper. Then you can easily transfer it into your pie dish and peel the parchment paper off at that time. Or you can just do like I'm doing here and just patch up your work a little bit. It'll be totally fine. We're making a home. We're feeding people. Things don't have to be perfect. Done is so much better than perfect. And if making your own pie crust from scratch is just one too many steps for you, then they have them at the store too. It's still better to make the homemade meal, even if you are using something from the store and maybe you don't have time to make everything from scratch. That's fine. So at the time that I'm making the pastry here, most things have already been cooking. I really like to simmer my tortilla meat for a long time. That's how it's traditionally made, and it makes it really tender and juicy. You actually add broth or water to your meat when you're making it, and lots of spices. But I didn't put the cloves in yet. So usually I keep some ground cloves, but I have used them all. And so I'm just using my handy little mortar and pestle to grind up some cloves for the meat, because it is the secret ingredient in my tortilla recipe. It really tastes so amazing, and I can always tell if tortilla is made with cloves. It just gives it this fantastic flavor. You should definitely try it. So here's my pork, and this is a blend of pork and beef that I'm using, and I'm just adding the cloves as the final step because I forgot to do it earlier. Tortilla at Christmas time is really so fun and festive. I highly recommend it. I'm thickening up the gravy in it a little, just with a bit of einkorn flour as well. That's not really a strictly necessary step, but I enjoy doing that. And now I'm just gonna, look how messy my pie crust is. I'm just gonna fill her up. I would be a little bit more fancy than this if it was Christmas, but it's not Christmas. This is just a weeknight meal that I was making. That's a good thing though about tortilla, is like it can feel so festive, but then you can also just have it any night of the week. In my husband's side of the family, they would get together and make a large amount of tortilla and freeze all of the pies. So his grandmother, all the cousins would come over and help, and his grandmother would be in charge of that, and they would all have tons of pies for their freezer, so then you can just have easy tortilla anytime. So homey and festive. All right, it's our time. We're going to make the top crust. You can see that I managed to be a little bit more patient and form this pastry into a dough, so I was going to have slightly rounder results for my top crust, because I realized that I was just being really impatient with my first crust. I think also einkorn flour likes to have time to sit. So in a lot of recipes, I'm not a pro, but I feel like I've seen in certain recipes that the gluten likes to have some time to relax. And I think that's part of why my top crust turned out better, because it just naturally had that time while I was busy with the bottom crust and filling it up to relax. So you can see that the pastry is behaving a little bit better, even though I'm totally still patching up holes, but I don't make no never mind, guys. It's totally fine. If this YouTube video serves only to empower you that your pie crust is much better than mine, then so be it. So, waste not, want not. I really love having a little bit of a decoration on the top of my pie. So I just go around and I pinch the edges, which is a little bit awkward on a cast iron pan, but it works fine. And then after I pinch the edges, I take my handy, I don't even know what you call that tool. What is that called? Bench scraper. Oh yeah, it's a bench scraper. My husband gave this to me for my sourdough, but I use it way more than just for sourdough. It's actually the handiest tool. Like if you are getting tough cookies off a sheet, or I don't know, I tend to use it a lot. So since I don't like to waste, I'm just gonna roll out these scraps and quickly cut out some decorations. I did not know where any little cookie cutters are. My mom always had these little tiny maple leaf cookie cutters, and that was what she always put on the top of her tourtiere as a decoration. But I don't really have like a cutter that I always use on the top of my pie. I like to just change it up and do different things, so I decided to make a quick little braid for around the edge. And I don't know, it's just fun. Sometimes I find myself getting sidetracked by these little things, and I like to, I kind of am critical of myself, like, oh, like, why did you get sidetracked by that, and you forgot to do this other thing that you were supposed to be doing. But it's really important as a homemaker to be joyful and to take some delight in what you're doing. So just own it. If you do that too, just own it. And the final step for pie, of course, is the egg wash. So I just have a little bit of egg and milk here. And I'm gonna do the top of my pie crust. It's night and day between a pie crust that's been egg washed and a pie crust that hasn't. And I'm not sure, I don't know if it makes as big of a difference if you're using gluten. But those little details matter a lot, I find, for like gluten-free cooking or einkorn cooking. It makes it just that little bit nicer. So I never skip the egg wash on my pie crust. I forgot to take a picture right before I went in the oven, but here is the completed pie, and I like to serve this with salad and beans. My mom taught me how to make baked beans the traditional way that she was taught how to do it, and she used to make it in the slow cooker, and now we make them in the Instant Pot, and they